You gonna move in a little bit, bring it in a little bit. But yeah, there'll probably be a few more folks kind of trickling down. But we should get started. Today we have our typically monthly Stump the Pastor hour, kind of our town hall. Anything that's on your heart or mind that you'd like to talk about. Lois is ready. We'll just kind of go around the mic. I will ask you to use the microphone just because we are. Okay, yeah. Darlene's birthday, donut holes. Should we sing? We should probably sing. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Darlene. Happy birthday to you. Woo! Happy birthday, Darlene. It's also Christie's today. Okay, well, we could still honor that. Okay, one more time. Just run it back. Anybody more? Anybody else? Let's get them all. Mary? Okay, yep. Okay, so we got to do Christy and Mary. Okay, ready? Yeah. Love it. Okay. What else? What else is on your hearts and minds today? If not, we will stump you. Yeah, that's the reverse. If you don't have questions, then we do. Don't you? You start us off.
All right. Well, I know that the word grace was mentioned a lot in church this morning, and it often is. But it's also something that I've been reading about the last couple of days, and reading from a biblical perspective, from a theological perspective, from both the Protestant and Catholic traditions, Eastern Orthodox traditions, what Luther might say, or what Wycliffe or Wesley and other early theologians might say about grace. Also, the difference between what we may say in the Lutheran Church or ELCA versus what they may say in the very right-wing, Missouri Synod or right-wing Christian denominations, okay, in light of what's going on in our country today. So I would just like to ask you about grace and the different types of grace that there are. That's all. I want them to work. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Luther, his idea of grace is top down, so that we are not climbing the ladder to receive God's grace or to earn it in any way. It comes directly from God through Jesus Christ. Grace is identified as God's unconditional love for us, no ifs, ands, or buts. And I think across the theological spectrum, grace is defined in this way. That Jesus' love for us and Jesus' salvation is what gives us grace, but the way we live it out is a little different, I would say.
Yeah, to echo a word that I used quite a bit today, grace is absurd. Unmerited, unearned, divine favor, I think, is kind of that's the definition that comes to my mind too. But yeah, I think that top-down thing is right on. What else you got, Delzy? Oh, yes. Story time.
We lived in South Carolina, and our neighbor was a Southern Baptist minister and very, very nice. And our youngest son loved Bible school. He went to every Bible school. Everyone. But he came home one day, and he was so excited. He goes, "Tomorrow we find how to be saved." And John said, "Don't let him go." No. And so he went to baseball practice that day. But the thing is, and we told him, "You're a Lutheran. You're saved by grace. We all are saved by grace. There is no way Yeah. So I just love that story. And I love John saying no.
You're going to baseball, kiddo.
A lot of Lutheran language, we don't use the word choice. That I think that would be a big difference between us and the Baptist or more conservative theologians would be we don't choose decision theology, that we don't choose to be saved, whereas in the more Baptist or any of those more conservative denominations, it would be you choose to be saved. You choose Jesus. And so you'll see in like our worship and in everything that we do, we don't use the word choice or decision. And if we see it, then the two of us, we have to be kind of the decision word police.
Or
God chooses us.
instead of just that our agency in that department is very limited, if at all. But God's choice, God's decision, God's grace in that is what God does. This is who God is and what God does.
And we just trust in that. There's mystery around it. We don't know. It's not our job to judge who is saved and who isn't. We just trust that God saves. And all we can do is tell our own stories about how God has loved us. That's about all we can do. If you look at like Missouri Synod, Wisconsin Synod, they are Lutheran. They ascribe to the same theology, just social and maybe just different views on social
Would
matters.
they say you have to open the door? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying when I say that? So some people will say that, that God chooses, but then you still have to kind of open the door. You still have to kind of receive it. And I think that might be where Missouri Synod still falls, somewhere in that kind of gray area. I don't know. Wisconsin, maybe. Randy, do you have have you read on this?
Well, not just Missouri Synod or Wisconsin Lutheran. Well, some of my relatives are Wisconsin Lutheran, and so I have to deal with that. But it's quite theological. It can be quite theologically different sometimes, especially. But some of the more conservative denominations, what I was reading is, and I'm trying to understand it in the terms of what's happening in our world today or in our country, and especially the onslaught against transgender folks primarily, and then, of course, gay and lesbian folks. And one of the things that many of the denominations believe, and this is, and I was reading some of the contemporary theologians associated with like Dallas Seminary and various places like that, Liberty, and they believe that grace can only be extended to people who are eligible for grace, and therefore like gay, lesbian, transgender folks are not eligible for grace because of their chosen lifestyle or their chosen their choice to be, they've made the choice to be sinful, therefore grace cannot be extended to them, which then gives them license to say some of the things that get said about them by political officials, other people. And that's really daunting to me. And so like this morning when I heard you preach, it was thrilling to me. It was. And the nice thing about the ELCA and this church in particular is that you extend grace from God, but from the pulpit. And people long, who are sitting in pews, I believe, long to hear about grace, and that God's grace is extended to you personally. God's love is extended to you. God's love, justice, and mercy. And so anyway, and then I think that's often missing in people's lives.
Well, Lutheranism, we say faith comes through hearing. That's why we have the word and the sacrament, why we have the pulpit and the altar as highlighted in the front of the worship space. And so the word is a very sacred thing in the Lutheran Church, and you're saying just what we hope whenever we preach is that God's Spirit works through us and that the word connects with people personally, and that God's Spirit, we trust in that. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah, we don't take it lightly. It's very important. I would say there's that idea, and the Lutheran Church, we've evolved too, just recently with LGBTQIA plus things and issues, and that how it's just so hard. And it used to be that women couldn't preach. It was 1970 that the ELCA had their first female pastor ordained. So these social issues we evolve, and I think part of it has to do with culture, but it's so like which sin is. How do you identify which sin is the sin that takes you out of the game? It's when you start picking and choosing which one, that's when you get in trouble.
And I think we've evolved in that way because of our theology of grace, because of our kind of ontology of humanity as well. I think that really has helped us both theologically kind of go back to those roots, but then also kind of in our understanding of culture and humanity, of diversity, of just kind of an openness and an expansiveness that I think often is harder when you have sort of guardrails and gatekeepers who are kind of at either at the seminary level or other kind of influencing levels. Yeah.
Yeah, little story. Confirmation for me was 3 hours on Saturday morning. 3 hours of baseball. And basically the pastor was rehearsing the sermon that he would be doing the next morning. So one time, 3 hours, and most of the 14-year-olds in the class were really tuned out pretty severely. And he could tell that. And one time he said, okay, nobody leaves till you tell me what I've been talking about for the last 3 hours. And so I thought, okay, I'm 14. I had a choice to make. Do I look like a nerd and actually tell him what he'd been saying, or do I just stay silent? And so I said, well, you've been talking about grace, which was the right answer. So I made the right choice. I was a hero, and we all got to go home.
Everybody cheered. How did you teach confirmation?
Less than 3 hours.
The answer's always grace.
Right. Or Jesus. The answer is always Jesus or grace. Yes, of course.
That's an impressive story. You come out of that experience and still choose to be a pastor.
Well, I mean, when you're 14, you don't know what to do.
You don't. You're savvy.
Yesterday, I read a little thing about a couple public figures. And after I read it, I said, this makes my soul hurt. But they said that the LGBTQ should be institutionalized. And that is so lacking grace. It's very hurtful. Yeah.
Yeah, is that it's yeah, sorry, you can I have another follow-up.
I was going to say that Trinity, reconciling in Christ congregations really have an important role to play. They are moving the ELCA forward when it comes to these issues and being leaders. So I really admire the way Trinity has embraced this and is continuing to move forward. The Reconciling in Christ group have put in more requirements for churches who are a part of it, and Trinity has embraced that, I understand. Also, progressive voices in the Christian sphere are lacking. There is progressive Christian writers, especially. There are programs where you can go and receive education as a progressive writer, and specifically with Christian issues. So there's groups that are trying to get pastors and theologians to start publishing more. We're just not as good at speaking out as some of these loud voices that are so upsetting. Like, you need a counterpoint. So I hope and pray that we can be louder about where we come from.
I'm curious, as you kind of name that reality in our public discourse right now. As like people of faith, how are you thinking about free speech, and what's going on in that realm right now?
While people are thinking about that question,
Yeah.
I want to ask both of
Dang
you
it,
an
you-
absurd question,
I
And it's
asked
one-
some absurd question.
and one that I have asked folks, and they will not really address it. Going back to Luther, Luther supposedly talked about grace, but also it's documented that he hated Jews. So how can we as Lutheran reconcile that? From someone, is he being two-faced? How do you reconcile that?
He was wrong. Yeah, 100%. And I think it raises the reality too that we do not lionize kind of people from history, and I think often that's been the case for Luther. He's been lifted up. He's been the closest thing that we could have gotten to a saint, but still incredibly human. And I think, not just Jews, but also the Peasants' Revolt too, which was basically the wiping out of a group of people who are standing up to resist poor treatment, poor labor conditions. So I think there are absolutely reasons to be critical, and the gift of being kind of in the modern world right now, or at least I thought it was we could openly dissent, we could openly disagree, and we could come at things from different points of view and do that in a respectful way. And I would absolutely disavow Luther's perspectives on the Jews. It obviously was picked up later. That was also justification for what was used in Nazi Germany and the Third Reich for treatment of Jewish people. It's still used today, still used now, right? So I think we still have to do that, and we still need to be critical of those voices who would seek to treat people less than beloved, grace infused children of God.
I think Luther was very good about admitting his faults when he was alive. So he would never say he was a saint. But it's good to be aware of his complexities, because we all are complex. But do you remember when the Luther exhibit came to the Institute of Art? And they were very conscious of including that information about his role and his thoughts on the Jewish community. And that, I think, was really good, that we need to learn and be aware of his thoughts around that and not hide from it, not keep it quiet, but to be very clear.
Looking at that, and the reaction was, that can't be true. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So they refused to believe it.
The ELCA, I think, has also publicized some refute about Luther's ideas about the Jewish, and individual synods have also been clear about it. But we can always do more.
Isn't that what's happening now with museums, with, removing information, not telling the whole story?
Yeah.
And as a person of faith, how do you feel about that?
Sad, afraid, angry. I feel like there are some people that are allowed to speak and others that aren't. There are some people that have consequences. There are others that don't.
Paul never hid from his history as a persecutor of Christians. He was always clear about it, honest about it, and so I think that's a good scriptural guide for us. He said, "I've been changed, but this is what I was."
just wanted to pull it back to the grace part a little bit of my past versus what I learned. I often say that it took meeting Dana to find out I was supposed to be a Lutheran my whole life. I grew up evangelical free, and that meant that same idea that I have to accept it. I have to be there. I have to, it was all about what I did and my choice. And it was also met that entire time with as much guilt of life that they could possibly put on my shoulders at once. And it was it Easter? Monday, Thursday, thank you. It was one of my first Monday, Thursdays I'd ever been to in my life. And the only way I've ever been able to describe it is I was hit with the Grace 2x4. And I was absolutely broken for over an hour, just sitting in that sanctuary that was dark and just utterly broken because I just kept on thinking to myself, not me, I'm not worthy. And I think that's one of the things we kind of also go up against is that's a lot of the teachings that a lot of these other folks are getting, and they don't feel worthy of the love. And the only way to sum it up is I love this place.
That makes me teary. Justice was mentioned in every petition but once and in a song, and that has gotten to be such a trigger word. Do you get pushback on that, and how do you respond to people who have a very radical view of justice and that it's all about me instead of it's all about others? I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but do you know what I mean?
What is the, could you explain about kind of it being a trigger word?
For instance, talking about justice for poor people. Well, I was poor and I worked hard for everything. That's not justice for me to pay taxes to take care of them. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's almost more equity. I don't know, has the word justice taken on, is it weightier now than it used to be?
I mean, I think all words have the potential to be made into something that they are not. Evangelical being one, too, that the very, meaning literally means good news. So, I mean, I think there are going to be a complexity of definitions of what certain words might mean for different people. Obviously, justice is it's a biblical word. So being kind of going back to the root of that too, and I think it was actually at the Synod Assembly this last year where Lois Malcolm kind of went into the root of evangelical, the word evangelical. I this is something I struggle with too. I think there's a need for us to really be continually reclaiming language or being clear about what we're saying in that. What kind of justice are we talking about? That's, I mean, this is I think too, just the challenge of preaching as well is trying to be very clear about what's at stake, what is really happening, what do we need to be discussing and talking about, what's on people's hearts, what are we worried about, and I think justice for me continues to be a word that I find really meaningful. And wanting to explore that and really not just like my justice, but God's justice in that, which there's something for me that's really compelling about sort of the scales of time being somewhat more in God's hands than just in human hands as well, that we can often miss, I think, some of what is actually just in that. Is that, I don't know, is that helpful?
Yeah, the word justice to me, equity is stronger than justice. And I think sometimes we equate justice with equity, and which I think is appropriate. But that is like my definition of justice might be different than yours. But I like so I like your thought about how we are careful to identify it and claim it. Yeah.
People equate justice with punishment, that if you committed a sin that God's justice will punish you. But I think people forget, and I know that a lot of people study Jeremiah here. Jeremiah equates justice with mercy. And I like to look at it, justice and mercy together, and that's how God sees it, not necessarily as punishment.
Is it justice and
Mercy and love.
well, justice and peace?
Justice, peace, yes.
Right? I mean, that's kind of that's like the I mean, I think equity is one thing, but like justice and peace, I think those are often. Oh, here, Jerry.
I like that the thought though that there also is the legal definition of justice that we're struggling
that's
with.
what I was going to bring up. Justice is a legal word by implication, and I think that brings along with it the implication that you can't earn it. Justice has to be, you can merit it without earning it, which is a really fine definition I'm trying to wring out of a rock, but you kind of get what I'm going.
That's really helpful though as I preach in the future now. I'm going to think a lot when I use the word justice and think through it.
Well, and I think there is sort of I think there's both ways to really name what's at stake. There's also, I think really what I try to do in preaching too is really invite imagination around something or invite reflection around something, whether that's asking a lot of questions, which I also do in sermons, which probably is really annoying at times. But what I'm hoping in that is that even if they aren't your questions, you might ask different questions too, because I'm asking them. If that makes sense. Which was a question. Sorry.
Gotcha. Going back to something that was asked earlier about freedom of speech or lack thereof. Very recently, and it was rather heartbreaking actually, had to have a fairly serious conversation with our son Sulaiman, which, for those folks who don't know, our family is my husband Mark and I, and then our 3 former exchange students who have claimed us as their American parents and still call us mom and dad to this day. We hear from them all multiple times a week, and our first son, Sulaiman, is in his sophomore year at Duke in North Carolina. Well, with him being here from Kyrgyzstan on a student visa, it is actually a very scary time for him because at any point, anything he says can be held against him. And the last time he was home, we had to say very specifically, these specific people you have your freedom of speech with, these other people you do not. And so you can talk to the campus imam, you can talk to the campus pastor. He loves Lutherans, even though he's a practicing Muslim. You can talk to all of them behind closed doors, but in public, if you see a protest, walk the other way. In public, don't share your thoughts. You can tell us anytime you want, but you cannot share them with strangers. And that was, I think, the most heartbreaking thing I've had to do since he came back, is tell him that he doesn't have freedom of speech.
This is kind of one of those things where, from a historical perspective, do you remember other times where that has been the case in your lifetime, where either people who are where their citizen status would be jeopardized by what they say or do, potentially by what they engage in? McCarthyism, yeah, maybe that time, kind of the Red Scare. Yeah, you're you're a history teacher, so
Yes, I
that
can
would
tell
be
you
helpful.
multiple times.
Let me put that back on you.
I do know that during the Vietnam War, I had an FBI file that was created on me, as it was on many, many people. I was arrested, civil disobedience, and stopped a manure spreader at 6 in the morning on a country road along with 150 other young people, which got us into jail. Well, we sat on a road, but I went to a rural school, so that meant stopping a manure spreader at 6 in the morning. But it was very disruptive. Anyhow, nothing became of it. I wasn't jailed or denied my rights, but I know that there was an FBI file created, and I mean that was true of many people at the time. It could be today. That's the point. It could be today. It wasn't then, but yeah.
And back in the mid 80s, my first husband and I traveled to Iceland. We had lived in Scotland, but we traveled to Iceland. And when we got back into Scotland, they wouldn't let us go through. I was actually allowed to with my son and my daughter, but my husband, who was Asian Indian, was stopped and had to take his, of course he had a trench coat on, had to take the trench coat off, but they went through every single picture from the camera, and back then we had film, and so we have no pictures of that trip, because they did not like the color of his skin, and there was something's going on in the world and you might be that person. Not that he had gone to speak theology at the university and had the letter that proved it, but, didn't matter. It was the color of his skin that he was stopped.
These days, I can't be fired. I haven't worked for 13 years, so.
You can say whatever you want. Yeah, Joan.
Those who know me well know that I'm from the Iron Range, which was a hotbed of communism. The president of the American Communist Party came from Cherry, which was not very far from us. And I used to play the organ for communist funerals. But the co-op mortuary made sure that we didn't talk about who these people were because it was a secret. This person's a communist, this person isn't. And it was the McCarthy era. My father was very conscious of that and knew of friends who had FBI files and what you could say and what you couldn't say. And they shared a lot of that with me. A lot of my friends had no concept that this was going on. But I'll tell you, it was probably as bad back then as it's currently getting into now.
Civil rights era as well with, files and on Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, all those leaders as well. Yeah, other things. We've got a couple more minutes. Is there history of that somewhere, Joan? What is kind of is there any remnant of that left in the Iron Range? Obviously not maybe not politically, but just historically.
My feeling is that they aren't going to call themselves communists, but they will say that they're socialists.
Okay.
And there's a deep feeling up there of wanting to be, shall we say, free, and to share with others. Many of the socialists are part of the cooperative movement, and many of them were Finnish people, and of course everybody knows I am 100% Finnish. And so, well, 99% according to Ancestry, but. I know, it's that 1% Swedish that kills me.
Joan, my dad grew up in Virginia, and I am half Finnish.
Really?
Yep.
What was your maiden name?
Koski.
Oh,
My grandpa and his two brothers are in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
oh, really? And I graduated with several Koskis.
There's a lot.
Yeah. We'll have to talk later.
Well, I think free speech and expression sounds important for us to think about and continue to wrestle with, and safety of speaking. The Lutheran idea of free we support free speech. It just does, and it goes both ways. That's the hard thing about free speech, is that you have to allow those who you don't agree with to have their say as well. Yeah, the security team has been meeting for several months. So this happened long before any of the local tragedies. So it's been in the works. And so this task force has been meeting, came up with recommendations to share with the council about security. And one of them, a video doorbell, just because the people in the office can't see who's at the front door. So now this will allow for that to happen. And there were a couple other.
May I
Oh,
ask?
yes, the library will be moved, and that's to help the LADC to be more centralized and safe in their area. And what was that? There's a couple others. Oh, yes, the predatory offender policy is another to help make sure we're being safe with our youth. Yeah, and for everybody.
Yeah, several of us were discussing, the whole safety plan thing, and I just had a question about whether there's anything in the safety plan about, if somebody did get into the building, if there were some kind of a crisis, is part of that plan, what do we do? Where do we go? Is there an evacuation plan even for a fire? We've never talked about any of that, and I would think that would be something that needs to be addressed and included in that plan.
So in the updated security manual, there is recommendations around kind of a crisis management situation. Some of that has kind of changed over the years of there's like it's like run, hide, fight. There's kind of like some people can choose different things, which is actually sometimes helpful in different scenarios as well. So there's language around that in there. The main great thing about Trinity is where we're located, being really close to the public safety. That is just kind of it's just a constant reminder that we have resources available to us very quickly. We've seen that in worship when there have been medical instances or issues that have come up, how quickly folks get here. It really is impressive. So I think that, at least currently, kind of how things are rolled out, that extra support is really close at hand. So there will be kind of some policy stuff, but on a bigger picture, that is really crucial for us. Yeah.
I would think we'd need to have more than just
some training.
Reading it.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked to, I think, and this is just, I think, general kind of PSA stuff. The see something, say something, as well as just, I think we need to really be communicative right now. Maybe over communicate. What is it? Is it Chief Communications Redundancy Officer or something? But there's just, I do think there's also, and sorry, this is totally a tangent, but I think there's technical changes and fixes that we are making right now, but they are very much adaptive challenges that are before us. And while we've talked about, could we encourage or empower our ushers and greeters to kind of be a little bit more sensitive to things that are going on? I think that role is really good. Might we, need another layer of that sort of, on top of custodial and like security, people who are kind of a little bit more paying attention to that bigger picture of safety and security, maybe a little bit more well-trained. I think that's another way about it. I think, too, just this conversation, continuing to have the conversation, but also kind of empowering the congregation to be a part of that and what you want in that, what's going to help you in that, too. I think Chris is really, are there things that you think of in that would be kind of how you would feel empowered in that? Training, obviously the policy. What else?
Well, Pastor Peter's getting at where we're at on the security plan. We're not there yet, but we made progress. But I have a question for a straw vote or opinion. One of the things we are debating is, do we lock the doors when service begins? And so the question I have, we're supposed to be welcoming, but what do folks here think about that question? Do we lock the doors?
Can you lock the doors when you have people coming literally from like 8 a.m. to noon or 8 a.m. to 11:15 or 11:30 in and out of the building? You can, if you'd like a vote, John. Do you need a motion?
I just want reaction.
We can't lock out the latecomers.
Yes, we can't lock out the latecomers, and there are latecomers, so I think that would be very unwelcoming.
Well, what time does the band, like people from the band come about like 9:45 too? So there's just, it's really that time frame. That time frame is really tricky. I think other times though, when there's programming happening, like when a choir, Annie will likely lock the doors probably about like 7:50 on a Wednesday night. So everything will be locked and then the choir will still be in here, right? We do kind of have some of those things in place, but I think there's still some variables in that too. Yeah, great. Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering about when we have groups coming in. Thursday morning we'll have a 9 o'clock yoga group coming in. This week we'll also have 10 o'clock knitters coming in. Are we going to have somebody to meet, or should we send somebody from our group up there to meet them, or are they all going to be video cammed in, or just wondering?
Those are the bugs that we have to work out. And this week will be our trial run to see how we want those details to.
What shall I tell my knitters when I send out my notice?
They will get in. Yep. Yes, they will get in. Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, the security task force has already been meeting. They have had a specific task that they've been working on, so they will be done at some point. And the council has to figure out what the next steps are. And the security task force the last few weeks has realized, there's some more stuff that we probably need to look into, and that may mean a longer term group. But those are all questions that are being asked. But very helpful to think through fire drills. Do we ever do fire drills on a Sunday morning to practice? Those are all good questions for those security leaders.
I have a curiosity question. The doorbell thing is, if you're facing the doors, it's on the left side. Is that correct? Okay, what about those of us who go in through the right side and hit that thing? Chuck says it won't work.
You'll need to buzz in, and then we'll come and grab you. We'll open the door for you. That's the bug that we're working out.
Why didn't you just put it over on the other side?
It's not so that door, there isn't an automatic unlock on that on the automatic one. There's just one on the left hand side. So that's what makes it possible for us to be able to kind of buzz in and out, is because the door has particular technology that allows us to do that.
That's been there for years.
Yeah.
Special uses.
Yeah. You are yeah, you're sitting next to the most knowledgeable man in this department.
Is there a way we should be looking at having let me call him a greeter, who sits at the 4th Street door, which is the only door that's open during Sunday morning, and there's somebody at that desk or position until most of the congregation is gone? It doesn't have to be the same person.
Yeah. No, it is. Yep, no, it is. That's another challenge of kind of our building, is there are multiple entrances, but yeah, I think there are busier times where it might make sense to have the doors open still. I think that's going to be true of Sunday morning. I think it's true of concerts and that sort of thing. But then when it's not busy, having that buzz-in system will kind of be the go-to. I think we got to wrap up, unfortunately. Thank you so much, everyone. Great questions. Yeah, this was Pastor Jen's first, so I think she did pretty well, huh? Let's give her a round of applause. Not too uncomfortable?